This is going to be a great episode. And Mike Parnell is a gentleman that I met. I had to scroll all the way back through my Instagram stories. It was back in September of 2021. And it's been amazing to see all the people that I've been able to meet through not only 3 of 7, but through 29029 and just a multitude of different things that have all been surrounded by social media. And through this conversation, you're going to hear a lot of what Mike and his newest adventure is, and I think it's maybe his most important beside his family, and that's the Ascent to Cure. So take a listen, check it out, and I really hope that you'll gain as much value and enjoy the conversation as much as I did. So you're my first.
All right.
So, no, like what we were talking about is the hitting the record button's always the awkward moment on these things, because then Tammy makes fun of me because she's like, "Oh, you started your podcast voice." So that's the last thing I want to do is to have a podcast voice.
I'm impressed that you can do these in front of Tammy. I always tell Erin to, not come to the office till afterwards.
Oh, I'm not in front of her. She's in there, but she can hear everything. So they make fun of me all the time. Like, oh, he's got his coaching voice. He's got his podcast voice. He has his IG live voice. I was like, what? But
hi, Tammy.
So you're, like I said before, you're the first one that I'm recording for this. So I was talking to somebody earlier today and inviting them on, and I even got the name wrong of the podcast. I had to go back. So it's Pathways to Greatness. And one of the things that excites me about having a conversation with you is that you have so many different pathways that you've taken to different things to create greatness. So before we get started, I want to do something fun, just so people could get to know you a little bit better. So would you rather is what we're going to start with.
All right.
So the first one is, would you rather lose your taste or smell?
Ooh, rather lose my taste or smell. I would rather lose my smell.
Okay, I'm with you. And then I know people out there is, if you lose your smell, you lose your taste. I get it. I understand, but
yeah, man, I love too much to lose my taste. So I'd rather not smell.
Yes. Freeze time or travel back in time?
And this is, would you rather?
Would you rather?
I would rather freeze time, for sure.
Okay.
That's always flying by us, and going back in time is memories, but I want more of them, so I need more time for that.
I like it. Would you rather live without music or TV?
Without TV, for sure.
Okay. What are some of your favorite music bands, singers, genre?
Man, I'm very diverse on that. Depends on what mood I'm in and what activity I'm doing, but long runs and stuff, hiking, well, not really hiking, but more like long runs. I like to listen to, actually, ironically, more chill music, like Grateful Dead, Dead & Co., things that don't get the heart rate up. Some people think that you got to get yourself amped up for those activities, but it's totally the opposite, as you know. All kinds of music depending on what I'm doing, but I think music anchors memories. So anytime I'm doing something different or experiencing something fun, I like to kind of tie that to some music so I remember it stronger.
Did you listen to anything during 29029?
I listened to Dead & Co. Maybe 2 or 3 laps out of the 17. The rest of them I was talking to people, and I didn't even listen to it with headphones. I just had my iPhone on kind of near my chest so I can hear it. And actually me and one of the women I shared a lap with were enjoying it and chatting about it. And then she messaged me on Instagram afterwards that she had never listened to Dead & Co., but she downloaded it on the way home, and her and her husband listened to it all the way to South Carolina.
And like you said, now that anchors a memory for her. I never thought about that, but you're true. It's like the soundtrack of the moment.
Oh yeah, big time. I can remember like specific locations from certain songs. It's great.
Oh, that's cool. I never thought about that. See, I listen to podcasts or books, Audible, and I guess I remember the books that I've done a lot of running with, or like those things. But then there's times where I listen to a really good book. I remember I was listening to Outliers during the Disney marathon. It was during the when I did the Goofy, and it's such a good book. But I was like, I need a notebook. I need to be able to take notes, but I couldn't. But
yeah, I'm
okay.
usually podcasts and books when I run too. And if I do feel like switching up to music, I'll do something kind of more relaxed and chill, that I can just kind of like get that same cadence with. But I've actually read something where if you're doing something physical, then whatever you're taking in, whether it's a book or a podcast or, information, it kind of like anchors it in a stronger way. So yeah, I find myself kind of going in and out of some of those podcasts when you're running, and like drifting off to like ideas you're thinking about, and then coming back into the podcast, and it really gets the brain churning for me.
Yep, I would agree. Same thing. And then the last one is: would you rather have pizza or tacos?
Ooh, a real good Neapolitan type pizza. I'll go with that.
Okay. All right. I was going to ask you what you liked on it, but that described it. You just like the plain old bread, sauce, and cheese.
Yeah, I like the toppings. When we went out in Orlando a few weeks back, I like it, but I think the dough is the most important part.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Nice brick oven pizza.
Well, and you've got the Northeast water, so you've got the good water, and
exactly.
Yeah, Florida's not known for its good quality water. Okay, so Michael Parnell, you're the owner of NPC Builders. You're married to Aaron, father to Nolan and Ryan, and doer of hard things. So when we think about pathways to greatness, what is that like? What's the first thing that pops to your mind when you hear that statement?
I think we got to try different things, go down different roads as we're figuring everything out. There were pathways in my life where I was 100% focused on career. And, when I was earlier on in my career and my life, I felt like that is what I needed to do to kind of like prove myself, get ahead, quote unquote. And that did do that, as far as professionally. I think I did jump ahead years beyond what I would have been, obviously, because I was all in on work. And then I'd say, once my kids were born, so I started NPC Builders a year after my son was born. I switched jobs. I was trying to climb that ladder again, went to a small company in a high position, and 6 months later got laid off. The small company wasn't ready to kind of expand, and I was the second highest salary. So out I went, and that kind of was my launching pad to starting NPC Builders, which was ideally, what it was there for me in my life, and never looked back. But my son was 11 months old at the time. And, one of the reasons why I wanted to start it is because I wanted to have more freedom of time and, not necessarily work less, but be able to flex my schedule as needed to be around for my kids. So that worked out. And then through that, I started to develop more interests outside of work, and I think become more like a more well-rounded individual as far as that goes, instead of being, 90% work, 10%, personal and family time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, is thinking that if you would have stayed in that other position working for somebody else, what are the likelihood that you would have started on all your ultra events?
0 to 0.
Really? Why so?
Negative 10%. Oh man, it was just so consuming. I finished my career working in New York City, which was a 2-hour each way commute from where I was living in New Jersey, or where I live in New Jersey. So, 4 hours a day there, commuting, 8 to 10 easily at work. So, when you're talking 12 to 14 hours of your day, there's little room to even take care of yourself health-wise and exercise, let alone the time and commitment it takes to do any of these events that we've gotten ourselves into. So, there was a point where, I was probably 25 to 30 pounds heavier than I am now. My knees would, I had knee surgery when I was 19. And I always blamed it on that, but my knees would literally buckle at times because my legs were so weak. Just standing there, and all of a sudden it would just move on me and buckle, and the bones would hit. And I was like, oh, I just got bad knees. I had knee surgery. I just got bad knees. And that's so wasn't the case. It was just, I was so weak from sitting on a bus or in a car or at my desk or whatever. So once I had the ability to dedicate more time to myself and keep better health of myself, I realized it wasn't my knees at all. It was me. So that whole change is definitely I've realized that the more I put into myself, the more I can output. And I definitely wouldn't have had that ability in my old career. So very thankful for that.
So, hearing about that it just sounds miserable, but we've all done those same things. We've all gone down that same path. What's a big learning that you took from that time going back and forth to the city?
Just balance, the work-life balance is such a hot topic, taboo type thing, oh, you're an entrepreneur now, you've got to, hustle and, 16-hour days. And I personally don't find that to be true at all. There's times where I'm out of balance for a season, a period. There's a month or two where a couple projects are finishing and I got to buckle down and just really grind. And there's times where I'm, running 2.5 hours a day, training for an event, and it just happens to be a slow period in work. So, it's, I think it's a juggling act, but I think the balance doesn't necessarily have to be 50-50. It's just whatever balance is to you, where you don't feel like you're inadequate in any of those buckets, your family bucket, your life bucket, your fitness and health bucket, your work bucket, keeping that juggling act in place where there's kind of, a happy medium in all areas. One of the things I've learned from doing these endurance events is, and I've always made a point of it, is I've never allowed myself to have it obviously impact work or clients. B, I've never missed a family dinner, never missed a, practice, a game, none of it. So I always made myself do those training activities in and around all the other, important commitments I have. So that those times have been the most fine-tuned, efficient periods of my life. Where I'm, so focused on, all right, if I'm at work, I'm locked in, I'm at work. If I'm home, I'm home and I'm, helping out and dealing with the kids and playing with them. Or if I'm, bringing Nolan to soccer practice, maybe I can double dip there and get my run in for an hour while he's training. So, those have been the most efficient periods of life for me, and I love it. In fact, when I finish one of those events, I'm sometimes lost, thinking yep, dipped out there. Hold on.
I got you still.
Yeah. Send this to voicemail. When those events end, you kind of feel lost, this goal that you've been grinding towards is over. And B, all right, now I have all this extra time. What do I do with it?
Well, you don't waste much time in filling it with some other event. So,
No. Yeah.
what?
And I take my time before I pick those next events too, because I think each one of them has like had a lot of meaning for me. So I try not to like dive right in, because it kind of takes the like, specialness out of each one.
So what I find interesting that I'd love for everybody to really hear, and hopefully they heard the same thing that I did, is the idea of efficiency. And you mentioned buckets, and you mentioned different buckets. And I feel like when I've not been efficient is I haven't clearly defined which buckets are important to me. So walk me through how you determine your buckets.
Yeah. So, I didn't grow up, I didn't have a dad around, and didn't have a real tight family life. So, family has always been a very important bucket for me. And that's why I felt so off that first year of Nolan's life, commuting to the city, where, I'd be leaving to go to Manhattan at 5 a.m, and I'd be coming home at 7 at night. And, under 1 year old, they're not even awake during that time. So I basically saw him on the weekends while he was awake. And that really wasn't something I wanted to continue. So that first year, there was a lot of, figuring out what I wanted to do, what would work to kind of balance things out a little bit better. And ultimately I was, pushed in this direction and landed on starting my own business, which obviously worked out fantastic for me. So other buckets, now that now that I've gotten myself healthy and in good shape, is continuing that, between the energy it takes to run a business and the mental bandwidth, and to keep up with all our commitments and everything at home. And I'm sure we'll talk about raising a kid with a rare disease, which is a whole another bucket of effort involved, and amount of energy and endurance involved with that. The fitness has really helped me kind of balance that all out, I think.
Well, in I'd be interested to think or to hear your opinion. And I know what it is, but I'm not going to assume, is the importance of your physical health as it pertains to being efficient with the other areas of your life.
Mm-hmm. Repeat that. Repeat that question.
Well, just like share what your opinion is on the importance of your physical health.
Yeah.
And as it pertains to the efficiency towards the other buckets.
Yeah. So I would just say the endurance of keeping up with it all. Not being tired and just coming home and sitting on the couch, and having the stamina to deal with the ups and downs. With Ryan's disease, there's times where, we're got to take her for blood work, and then there's a day or two of worrying. So the running, helps manage that stress load big time. And I know my wife has for the past year been very dedicated going to her gym, and exercise has been a huge factor in dealing with the stress of the ups and down roller coaster of dealing with an illness. So yeah, it's mental and physical, I would say. It's been huge for us.
Well, and have you always wanted to go run either early or late in the day?
No, I mean, so 3 years ago, I wasn't even a runner. I didn't run at all. I did some, yoga, Pilates, P90X type workouts. And I was at an event. This is actually funny. It'll tie to a lot of other things. I was at an event called Summit of Greatness by Lewis Howes, and I heard Jesse Itzler speak for the first time in person. And I had just started following him on social media, and he had he talked about two things. One, his book, Living with a SEAL with Goggins, which I immediately downloaded and listened to. And the other one was 29029. And I also, in the event, while he was speaking, looked up 29029, was reading all about it, and tried to immediately get in, which would have been a colossal disaster because I would have failed miserably a month later without training for that. But that was on my radar. And so after that event, it kind of spurred me into action of like, all right, I'm going to go run a 5K next weekend. Hadn't run more than, I don't even know, jogging a little bit, kicking a soccer ball in 20 years. And now I'm signing up for a 5K. And, living with a SEAL kind of kickstarted all that. So I was like, I had this goal in mind, 29029. And during the 5K, another, idea, happened. And that was, all right, I'm going to enter 29029 and do it as a fundraiser for this foundation that supports Ryan's disease, the Cure JM Foundation. And that started me off pretty much like anchored the idea of training for this event, which, as you know, got delayed another year. So we ultimately trained for it for 2 years. And 2 years locked in on that one goal, and having a cause behind it, like raising money, really just cemented the whole habit of training and training for a purpose.
Yeah, and the health part, that again, that the better you feel physically, the better you can show up for everybody emotionally. And there's been elements and times where I may have been good physically, but not good emotionally or mentally. And you're going to have those ebbs and flows. But I know for sure is if you're not dialed in on your physical health, you're not going to show up as your best self. It just never happens.
Yeah. Like, so when Ryan got diagnosed, that was 5 years ago, I had just started to like take better care of myself. And her diagnosis, was very scary at the time, with like muscle weakness, and we had no idea what we were getting into. So one of the first things I thought of was I've got to get a lot stronger. Like physically, I was thinking at the time, like I don't know how long she's going to be weak. So, there might be, I might have to carry her or help her walk, or we had no idea, and fortunately it wasn't a long time with the medication that she went on to regain her strength. But at the same time, that idea of taking physical care of myself really kind of also transformed into more mental care of myself, which led me down to all the podcasts I started listening to. And, I went to a Tony Robbins event, and that really helped me kind of deal with things differently than the way I grew up with them. Like I, would parent a lot differently. I was more like an authoritarian type parent. And, I became, I think, a little more emotionally intelligent of a parent after that. There's many ways to parent, and whatever your way is fine. But for me, and the way my kids reacted to it, it was more important to calm down and change the tone and deal with things in a little more softer manner. It has been a little more effective for our family. So, and then from that, more podcasts, and then leading to Jesse, and then leading to David Goggins, and then leading to all these other people I've met through these programs has really, totally transformed my life. So in a way, I kind of owed some of that, a lot of that, to my daughter getting sick. Because I don't know if I ever would have gone down that road of, kind of bettering myself and being interested in that. And then the people I've met through that, helped form the foundation that we just started, and met you that way. So yeah, I can't imagine that the path I went down would have ever even opened up for me if my daughter didn't get sick.
Yeah, well, and it started, and I want to come back to your daughter in just a second. And you had said it earlier, and we're similar in the sense that sometimes the paths that we're supposed to be on, we get kicked into, or we trip and fall into that path, and we think it's not the path, and that we've been taken off of our path that we're supposed to be on. But in reality, when you got laid off many years ago, that was the path that you were supposed to be on. And when those real big life trials kick in, we don't think about it until we look back. So and especially your daughter, like that is way beyond getting laid off from a job. So tell everybody about her and what her diagnosis was. And I want you to dive into the foundation because it's really cool.
Yeah. So she has a really rare autoimmune disease called juvenile myositis. It only 2 to 3 in every 1 million kids are diagnosed with this every year. So it's super rare. I mean, you're talking, in the hundreds of kids in the U.S. that have this. It's basically caused the immune system to attack its own muscle and skin cells, and it could develop into just a rash, or in her case, muscle weakness. So her shoulders and neck area, and her trunk down by her thighs and hips become weak when it flares. When she first was diagnosed, she went from just a little bit of a rash, and we weren't really sure what it was, to, a couple of days later, like she wasn't able to walk up the stairs by herself. So it happens really fast and hard, and the treatments are very difficult, like heavy doses of steroids, oral steroids, weekly shots of a low dose chemotherapy drug called methotrexate, monthly infusions of IVIG, which is like basically spun out of blood, which take 7 to 9 hours to do in a hospital, monthly. She's done, I don't even know, 45 of those over 5 years, probably. Those kind of have a withdrawal a day or two later, where they can get these really nasty migraines. It makes them sick, throwing up. So it's tough. It's really tough. Tough on her, and tough on, the whole family around her. So she's gone through a couple rounds of over the years of getting close to what we thought was remission, and we scaled back or withdrew the medication altogether, and then the disease just came back. So she's on her third kind of cycle of that. Just came off of steroids again, and actually just this week got an MRI that cleared all signs of active disease in her body. So now she's just on this maintenance drug that will hopefully keep that in check, and which is, kind of in this world, it's the kind of best scenario you can get, other than being in full-blown remission. It's like a more, kind on the body medicine as can be, at least. And hopefully that kind of maintains her and stabilizes her for the foreseeable future.
That's awesome. And she is a light. I mean, you see, just when I had the privilege of meeting her, and I'd met you and Aaron before, is that she still has that sparkle in her eye, which I can't imagine many adults being able to handle what she's handled and not have a pity party for themselves. Yeah.
I mean, it's very inspirational to see, like, from 3 years old, now she's 8. I mean, I can't even imagine how many times she's had blood drawn. We were doing weekly shots for, I don't even know, 150 weeks, maybe more, until we got off that medication. It's incredible how many times she's been in those situations, and taken a deep breath and just stepped forward and stepped into whatever she's had to deal with, and keeps the smile on, from screaming and crying when she's going to get her poked to a minute later, she's got the smile back. It's just, it's incredible. And that's kind of like what got me into doing these endurance events was to kind of honor that struggle that she's on, and kind of put myself in her shoes, and just do things that are really hard to like train that endurance into you, that like when things get hard, you can't give up. And she does that, every day, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that led to you talked about it earlier, about raising money for the Cure JM Foundation for 29029. So talk about that, and then transition how that led to you starting your own foundation.
Yeah. So initially, my goal was to raise $29,029. I obviously, with the 29029 name and everything, and that seemed like a massive stretch for me. I've raised some money before, a few thousand here or there for, breast cancer, walks and stuff like that. But $29,000 seemed like a massive amount of money to me. And I was in this mastermind, and the guy running it was like, that's one of the guys in it was like, that's not a big enough goal. I was like, yeah, it is.
That's a big goal. $29,000 is a lot of money.
Like, I don't know, too many people that are gonna, knock off big chunks of that in one bit. So that's a lot of small donations in my mind. And he's like, no, that's not a big enough goal for people to think of donating in large amounts. You've got to think bigger to get bigger donations. And that kind of made sense to me, and also scared the heck out of me. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to up it to 100,000. And at the time I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to raise $100,000. Like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
But by doing so, it got me thinking bigger. So that was in 2019, shortly after we all signed up, and the event was going to be in 2020. So on New Year's Day, I was up in Vermont. We were up there skiing for the weekend, and I was on a walk, and I said, you know what? I'm going to donate. I'm going to pledge 10% of our company profit to this fundraiser, and going forward towards JM, research. And I did a Facebook, Instagram, Facebook, video about it. And so 10% of every project we build, every house we build, 10% of our profit from that contract goes to the fundraiser, which at the time was for the Cure JM Foundation. So I said, by doing so, that'll build up. Like, that'll be thousands in chunks, and that'll kind of spur on how we can get there. And then 3 months later, COVID jumps out of nowhere, and that 10% pledge became awful scary, because who knows what is going to happen. Like, I could be I could have one project over the next year or two. Who knows what's going to happen? Like, we had no idea what we were getting into. But I decided to keep it, and regardless of what was going on, I was committed to continuing that pledge and following through on it. And whether that was 10% of a $500 mini job, or a $500,000 project, whatever it is, I was going to go ahead with it. We were committed to it. So obviously everything worked out. For the building business, COVID actually was a boom for us. Ironically, people, relocating out of the city down to where we live. Summer houses then became year-round houses. It's just been a giant real estate boom. Which has, basically after about a 6-month slow period, been the busiest two years of our, 10-year history. So, so what I was getting at with that is that by making that pledge, an interesting thing came about it where, I don't know if you've ever had this, but like, I've always been weird around like money goals where like I've there's almost like a guilt for trying to push for more and more. Like I've always been driven to, move up the ladder and this and that. But like with the business, I've always been like, well, be happy with what you got. Like you're doing pretty well. Like this is good. Like this is enough. And with kind of changing the reason why I'm driving to grow the business and driving to, pick up more projects and build up the revenue is now, that means I can donate more to this cause. And it's kind of tied a purpose behind the business, much more than just, monetary gain and, financial status for me, which never really seemed that important to me. Like I always kind of was striving to be better and, build the business just to, just because that's what you're supposed to do, basically. But now I'm really driven to build a business because it's going to help me with these philanthropic goals. So anyone out there that has a business, I highly recommend doing this to whatever cause that you really strongly get behind, because it's much more fulfilling than just, pushing to go buy a new car or buy a boat. At least for me it is. So anyways, so fast forwarding ahead, pledging our 10% of our profit has really like boosted that fundraising capability. And I also made those donations in a timely manner to capitalize on like matches that were being pledged from different companies and individuals. So ultimately we ended up hitting our $100,000 number through the event getting postponed a year. I think we were in like the 30s after 1 year of fundraising, and that extra year that we got from the COVID delay with 29 by the end of that year, by the end of 2021, I guess it was, we ended up hitting the $100,000 goal, and I think we ended up around like 102,000 over that 2-year fundraiser period. So it was awesome. I mean, it was a lot of people came out and supported it, and it really kind of opened my eyes to like, hey, like you really got to like stretch yourself, because a lot of times I think we hold ourselves back with like what we think is realistic, and not necessarily like just going for what might be achievable.
Yeah, well, and the whole thing, and I jotted it down, that was spinning in my head, and I wrote down, is bigger goals create bigger opportunities. What you said, that one, and that's the part of the pathway we lose sight of, or at least I lose sight of, is how just a simple conversation with someone that he said probably just thought, okay, here's my moment, I'm going to just share something and whatever, Mike's going to take it or he's going to leave it. And that, like, the impact that we can have on somebody by making statements, we never know. So that's why I really choose what I say and how I talk to people, because that's going to impact someone. So through that pushed you, because you would have hit your $30,000 goal in that first year. Everybody would have high-fived, because that's a huge accomplishment. But just think of the 70,000 that would have been left on the table, because you wouldn't have had the same focus and the desire. The other thing that I jotted down is, by you committing and putting a purpose behind the revenue, was another thing that I put down, is that it created a different why for NPC Builders. It also showed that you're not just walking the mountain. You're not just doing the physical part, is you're committing to doing the same thing you're asking other people to do. That, again, kind of understanding where you were in your business and where COVID was, is you're probably calculating in your mind that 10% could keep the lights on at the house. But there's that commitment that you had that, look, it'll take care of itself. this needs to go there because it's going to help more people.
Yeah. Yeah. And even from, jumping out of the philanthropic side for a minute, and just from a business standpoint, it's also showing your clients, who you are without, like when we make a donation in our client's name, like we'll post the check with the inscription, like in honor of, Jeff Forrester. And it's going off. So there's zero, it's full transparency. And, when you're choosing between builder A and builder B, and, builder A is doing what we're doing, and builder B is, not to knock anybody's hobbies, but like out on his fishing yacht on the weekend, obviously where his money is going, like, who are you going to go for? Who are you going to choose? The business who's making a bigger impact by working with them, or, or the other guys. So yeah, it's I think it's probably won us some work, because of, people understand where our priorities are, and, what kind of people they're working with.
So you had a huge success raising money for Cure JM, which is awesome. And, being a little part of what you were doing, and the adventure and the journey that you were on when you were hiking that mountain, is you also crossed paths with some people that you had no idea that you would cross paths with, that is creating even larger opportunities. So talk a little bit about what you can. I don't know what you can and can't talk about from that perspective, but definitely transition that into what your foundation is as well.
Yeah. So there's two kind of incredible stories that came out of this. And I'm going to go back to May of 2020. So we're about 2 months into COVID, and I had this idea. I'm part of Jesse Itzler's BYLR, Build Your Life Resume coaching program, for a few years now. And so I posted in that community, let's all get together on a Zoom call, a couple times a week, and we'll do it. We'll call it the Small Business Mastermind. And anybody who's got a small business, or just needs to work through whatever challenges they have with, their business in COVID, let's all get together. There could be like a couple of hot seats each week. And then the group, the person would explain their challenge, and then the group would give input from all walks of life and areas of the country, and try to help people out and give people ideas on how to get through it. So a couple of people, I met a lot of great people on that call that I still keep in touch with. We had them for weeks, like probably a couple months. And two people that stand out that really impacted these two paths. One is Jody Ames. So she founded Hope Loves Company, which is a foundation that supports families and caregivers for people with ALS. Her husband died of ALS. Her new husband's prior wife died of ALS. She founded this organization like 10 years ago, and they hold camps all around the country. I think there's 7 or 8 of them, for families and caregivers of people with ALS to get together, whether the person with ALS has passed on or they can attend as well, and just to get together and kind of have a community of support with one another, and do some fun things. They canoe and different activities and whatnot. And so that kind of spawned an idea of what I might be able to do in the JM community. And then another woman there owns a company called Salty Britches. And Amy was also at 29029 with us. And she was talking about her business a bit on that call, but since then we had remained in touch. So I'll talk about the Amy story and where that led, and then we'll jump into the camp story. So we were, you, me, and Amy were at 29 together, and Amy said, "Hey, did you guys get to meet Tim Coleman over there?" This is at the awards dinner, and
which is at the very end, by the way. It's the end of the event
of a 2.5-day event. It doesn't even make a whole lot of sense why she would ask that question, frankly. Like, we were, three of 250 people on the mountain. How she met Tim and why she would even say, "Hey, did you meet him?" She didn't say that about anybody else. So that, like, the kind of serendipity of that is kind of, amazing. But I said, "Yeah, actually, yeah, me and Tim did a couple of hikes together." I said, he ran like the Boston Marathon last weekend. He had a knee brace on. He was hobbling his way through it and was still a finisher, and it was on just as good of a path on that event as I was. And I trained the hardest I've trained for anything in my life for 2 years for it. So, I'm like, yeah. And she goes, "Did you know he owns a pharmaceutical research company?" I said, "No, that didn't even really come up when we were talking. I talked a lot about, Ryan and her disease and stuff, but that didn't even come up." And I kind of tabled that and connected with them on Instagram afterwards, but just to follow each other and keep in touch. And the following week, Tim DM'd me on Instagram and said, "Hey, Mike, good connecting with you. I'd like to follow up with you if you're interested on a phone call. I own a pharmaceutical research company with an interest in pediatric rare diseases. And I'd like to hear a little more about your daughter's disease, and maybe there's some way I can help in any way I can." Which was amazing. What are the odds that I probably met 10 people on the mountain, realistically, that we were on the same pace and over 36 hours, shared time together, and he was one of them. And, this kind of irony happened. So that first call has led to probably, I don't even know, 15, 20 calls over the course of the past 14 months. And we are founding a company called Orion Therapeutics, which is a play on my daughter Ryan's name. And Orion is, a constellation, which is a Greek god. He was a hunter. And the idea I had with that name is that Orion will be the hunter of bad cells in JM kids' bodies, and he's going to hunt out and hunt out bad cells. So by doing so, we potentially could cure the disease. So we've got through no investment or funding yet. Just contacts and good people that Tim knows. We've done drug scans. We've actually identified a therapy as well as a drug that could potentially do, in theory, what we're looking for it to do with these bad B cells. And we're talking to some of the best researchers in the world, frankly, about the process that he's come up with and what our next steps would be to bring those further along into trials. So mind blowing, the paths you can go down by accident, and what people and things you can be introduced to.
Dude, so we've talked about so many, all of our conversations are different conversations. So this is all the first time that I'm hearing about all this. And so I knew you guys had some conversations, and that's what I was excited about, but I'm holding back the emotions because that's really cool.
It's like, it gives you chills every time you talk about it. And you can dial it back, I might not have followed up with Tim if Amy hadn't said that, at the awards dinner. And Tim might not have contacted me if I didn't connect with him after the event. And I wouldn't have known Amy if I didn't, come up with this idea of a small business mastermind during COVID to just try to help people. And, I wouldn't have even been in that group if, I didn't go to this event and hear Jesse speak. And I wouldn't have been at that event if my daughter didn't get sick, because I didn't even listen to podcasts before that.
Yeah. And so, you couldn't make this story up. Like, you couldn't sit down and write it.
Yeah.
Because then people would be like, no,
yeah.
that's just not possible. Because the Tim encounter on the mountain, Hollywood would have written it completely different. But it doesn't have the same power. I mean, because I was sitting there because we both looked at each other like, what? He owns a pharmaceutical company. And that's the beauty of this is all part of Pathways to Greatness. But when you do events, these ultra events, there's no name tags, there's no business cards, there's no titles. It's just people neck deep in the suck, so to speak, that you're just in it. You're having a real conversation. You're just sharing your path and what's been going on, and people just listen. And I think we've talked about this individually, is I wish life was like that, where people would just connect and not figure out okay, how do I need to talk to Mike to figure out how I can get something from him, versus making that connection. And then both of you genuinely wanting to help each other and say, well, how can I help you today?
Yeah.
And that it's just awesome. So that leads you over to creating your foundation, because I don't want to skip this, because this has been fun to watch.
Yeah. So the other kind of serendipitous connection through that mastermind was hearing about this Hope Lowe's company, and through run after run after run after that call, I'm like, man, this would be like amazing to do for kids with JM and their families. But it's one of those ideas. Like, first of all, in the early stages and midst of COVID, like, getting a bunch of sick kids together in person is about the furthest thing from what anybody wants to do. You're not going to be, putting at risk immune compromised kids together in the early stages of COVID. So, but it was an idea that just, I couldn't shake from my head. And I kept seeing and hearing reasons why it was so important to follow through on. One of the challenges of having a rare disease, as you can imagine, is its rarity. Most of these kids have never met someone in person that also has the same disease as them. And same thing with the families, like, the parents and siblings, like, who are also dealing with these challenges, immensely, and the stress of it, also don't know anybody personally. Like, people can connect on Facebook groups and through messaging and stuff, and that's great and it's helpful. And I'm sure some even get on calls together, but that human connection is really missing, face-to-face interaction. So my daughter would as she's growing and getting older, start asking questions like, why did God give me JN? Why am I the only kid at school who has to go to these infusions and take medicine every day? And really tough questions that you don't have an answer for as a parent. But it was clear that she needs to not feel alone in this, challenge, and to know other kids. So once kind of, COVID was more in the rear view mirror, and after that, our 29029 event and hitting that fundraising goal, I was like, I need to turn this Ascent to a Cure concept into a foundation and go for creating these camps. And I kind of had the confidence from doing that fundraiser that I can do it, even if it was by myself without a lot of help. I think I can get enough money together to hold a camp each year. So over the last year, I've been working on it, and with the help of a couple other people from our community, Bree Hagan has been a huge help with me and Aaron. I met Bree through the 29029 community a few years ago. She was actually looking for people to submit kind of inspiration to her to dedicate each of her laps in Utah. And I sent her a picture of Ryan and gave her the background of what she goes through. And she dedicated a lap of her 29029 journey to Rye, and then had since raised money for our fundraiser, as you did as well. Thank you very much. So she's kind of been involved from kind of day one, and as a huge force for us pushing this thing over the finish line, getting the pricing together for the camp, and she's our board secretary. She's just been awesome. Another community member, Julie Traxler, is donating time with her company SB Pace. She's doing social media assets for us. She's actually currently working on our website. So like the community that we're all involved in between these events and coaching programs and everything has just been amazing, as they would be. It's such a great group of people that are just looking to help others. And so going back to Jody Ames. So a year ago, right after I committed to getting the foundation formalized and filing paperwork and everything, Jody had a BYLR get together at her house around the holidays. And it was just for like local, like New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania area members to get together in person and have some food and chat. So at that event, I was, sitting down with a few women there, and I was just explaining what I wanted to do with this camp. And one of them said, "Oh, well, it's funny. Me and my husband own a camp in New York State, about an hour north of New York City, and it would be perfect for this. Like, we have glamping tents and all these activities. You can camp overnight there. It's like 75% covered with shade, because one of the issues with these kids with JM is UV exposure can cause a flare if they get UV exposure and sunburns and whatnot. So it was just like, oh my God, like what are the chances of that? Like, another random person that I met through one of these groups, and it's like a plug and play perfect location to host the event at. She's like, we'll do it at cost. We can handle everything, or we have like staff there that you don't even need volunteers. So that's where we're hosting it. It's going to be hosted at Adventureland, New York, on the Ring homestead. Carmen Ring and her husband Eric own it. And we actually just booked our first camp event for August 4th to 5th in 2023. So, from middle of November this year, a year after committing to getting it going, we got our 501c3 approval from the IRS, and now we've got our first camp booked, and we're really off and running and starting to promote it. And we, just through a few social media posts, I think I have responses from like 24 families interested in coming already. So our goal is to get 50 families, and we're already halfway there. So we'll see.
That's, again, you can't make it up. You can't. I mean, and that's, I feel like so often, I'll speak for myself. Sorry, this dog. Is that That'll be better. So you get it for real. It's not well crafted in studio, but the what's amazing is that I feel like so often we become victims to this prescription that we see play out on social media about how success happens. And we feel like it's a 10-step process because that's what all these online coaches are saying is like, you follow this system, this is success. We've talked for about an hour. You couldn't prescribe any of this stuff. And one of the things that you told me right when I started what I was going on for 2022 as being a single, a business owner, is it's not managing the day-to-day, it's managing the day-to-day emotions. I don't think that's exactly how you said it, but it's so true. And to me, that's what I want people to hear about what you were able to do throughout the whole thing is you managed the emotions by having a bigger why.
Yeah. Like, so to say that I started really committing to getting the foundation going a year ago is true in my head, but it took until, when did we start working together? May, I think.
Something like that. Yeah.
Probably May. All right. So that's like 6 months of procrastinating and dealing with, imposter syndrome. And I finally had to go to you and say, look, I need to hire you as my coach to have some accountability for this thing because I have to do it. I want to do it. And I can't get the first step off the ground. And it was really just, honestly, it was like fear of failure, fear of like, what if I do all this work and no one shows up? What if I do all this work and I can't get the 501c3 approval? Who am I to found a foundation and, put this thing on my own? I mean, I've done a lot of fundraising, but okay, like this is a whole nother animal. So yeah, it actually took me hiring you as a coach for a few months to like, all right, this is what you're doing the next couple of weeks. This is what you're doing the weeks after that. And then we meet and I can't be embarrassed meeting with you that I didn't do anything again. So,
so ego plays in.
Sometimes you've got to like force your hand and, build in accountability to make it happen, and that did actually get me over the hump. And then after a few months of that and having some momentum, then I was like, all right, I'm not stopping until this is done. Like, I've got a few more yards to go over the goal line. I'm going to finish this thing. And we got it done.
Well, and there's no telling where this path is going to take you. And that was my vision for starting this podcast, because everybody has an amazing story and everybody has different ways to accomplish what they want to accomplish, or not even know that they're going to accomplish something, like starting a therapeutics company. That was never on your radar. You just wanted to find help for your daughter. But then out of that, you potentially can help every child that encounters this. And again, if we go back, it all started with potentially with you being laid off from your job.
Yeah, literally. Right. And if I wasn't, and my daughter still got sick, like, I don't even know, it very well could have led to, me and Erin being divorced and not being able to handle all the pressures of, everything that was to come after that, me still being gone, 60, 70 hours a week working up in New York City. That's not really conducive to the additional help and support that's needed to, deal with everything, all the challenges of managing Ryan's, course of disease, and Erin's, emotional and mental stress load. So yeah, our whole path could be drastically different if I didn't get laid off.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to, we don't know the path that we're on until we look back to see where we've gone and where we've come from. And and that's where wisdom comes into play. And that's where the gray hairs come into play, is that you have to go through all that stuff to look back, because each part of that is your story. And if we try to have such a sterile, prescriptive life, we'll have no story.
Yeah.
We might have success, we might have accomplished things, but where's the fun in that? I mean, trees have knots and twisted branches for a reason. Those are the ones that look cool. The super straight ones that they've manicured and trimmed, yeah, they're kind of cool, but they don't have the same character. So that's what your story is a lot of character.
Yeah, just, I always think back on this, like Jesse said in his like kickoff speech right before we started 29.029, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it's like, if you want to be an exceptional, or if you want to have an exceptional life, you have to put yourself in exceptional situations. And I mean, that is so true. Like you don't meet people that are going to change your life by sitting on the couch watching Netflix. It's just not going to happen. If you have the same routine every day and you do the same things in and out, you're going to have the same life. And that's fine if that's what you want. But if you're, unhappy or looking for more or want to make a difference, you need to get up and go do some things. And some of those things that you do may not be things you're comfortable doing. 29.029 was a huge leap for me when, I ran my first 5K a month before I signed up. But at the same time, look what doing that has led, look at all the paths that we've gone down since then. And the other thing is, like, some of these paths you go down may not work out. Like, there's no guarantee that we're going to cure juvenile myositis with Orion Therapeutics, but it's one more iron in the fire of a potential improvement for these kids and these treatments by doing so. And, one more swing, an attempt to make a difference. So, sometimes you got to just make the leap and not be afraid to fail as well.
Well, to quote our dear friend Chad Wright, that's enough said, man. I was going to ask another question, but that was absolutely awesome to finish up on. So thank you for being my first.
Man, I think you're going to have a great podcast. You're like a natural interviewer. I've always thought that, and super easy to talk to. So thank you for having me on and sharing the foundation. And I'll be sharing this episode a lot when it launches, and to get our message out, and to bring some light and viewers to you, because I think you're going to have a great podcast here on your hands.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and come back for the next episode.
Yes. And Merry Christmas to you and Tammy and the kids, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thanks, brother. Talk to you soon.